My wife faked her death to leave me and our kids behind for a new life with her lover. You won't believe what happened when I caught my wife in the act, betrayed by the one person I trusted most. But it gets crazier. This is a story about revenge, trust, and the cost of a broken heart. Stay with me to the end, because the truth is more shocking than you think. How far would you go for payback? Find out what happened next. I remember the exact moment my life fell apart. It was a Sunday afternoon. The sun was just starting to set over the Texas horizon, casting that warm orange glow across our backyard. I had just gotten back from a little league game, laughing at how my son had made the most epic slide into home base, and how my daughter had braided my youngest's hair with enough determination to make it look like an Olympic event. Everything felt right. Everything felt perfect. My wife, Claire, was at home too, fixing lunch in the kitchen, humming along to whatever pop song was playing on the radio. That was the last normal moment I would ever have. I was sitting on the couch, my feet up, just trying to catch my breath after the game. The phone rang, and I didn't think anything of it. It wasn't unusual. Probably another sales call or someone from work trying to catch up. But when I picked up, I immediately knew something was off. It wasn't the voice of someone I recognized. It was a man's voice, flat, with a tone I couldn't quite place. He introduced himself as a sheriff from the local department. That was when everything started to go wrong. "Mr. Porter?" he asked, his voice shaking slightly. "I'm afraid I have some bad news. There's been an accident." I didn't know it then, but the world as I knew it was about to end. I remember the next few minutes like a dream I couldn't wake up from. The words "boating accident" kept repeating in my mind, bouncing off the walls of my skull, each one sinking deeper than the last. Claire was gone. A freak storm. No body recovered. The authorities had searched the lake for days, but they couldn't find anything. I could barely hear the man's voice through the haze. I couldn't focus. My mind couldn't process it. How could she be gone? She was just there, laughing with me this morning, holding our youngest in her arms while telling me about some new recipe she was planning to try out. It didn't make sense. How could my wife, my partner, my best friend just vanish like that? The man on the other end of the phone was kind, trying his best to be gentle, but I couldn't hear him. I couldn't hear anything but the rush of blood in my ears, the sickening thump of my heartbeat in my chest. I couldn't believe it. I didn't want to. He told me they would send someone over to collect my statement and help with the arrangements. He offered his condolences, but it all felt so distant, so hollow. I barely remember hanging up the phone, but I do remember staring at the wall for what felt like hours. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. Claire, the woman I had spent my life with, the mother of my children, gone. Just like that. The next few hours were a blur. Family started showing up, trying to comfort me, but nothing could. They could see the hollow look in my eyes, hear the cracks in my voice when I tried to speak. But they didn't really know. They didn't know what it was like to have everything ripped away from you in an instant. To be left with nothing but questions, nothing but an empty house. My kids, bless them, they couldn't understand what had happened. How do you explain to a 4-year-old that their mother isn't coming back? I remember my daughter, Rachel, asking me with those big, trusting eyes, "When's mommy coming home, Daddy?" I wanted to lie. I wanted to say something, anything, that would make her smile again. But I couldn't. So I just held her and told her that mommy had gone on a trip, and I'd tell her more when the time was right. The house felt different. Quieter. The walls that had once felt like they were bursting with the noise of our family felt suffocating now. Like they were closing in on me. The air felt heavy, thick with grief I couldn't escape. Every room I went into felt empty. Every corner seemed to whisper her name. The bed we had shared, the bed I had once hated for being too small, now felt like a vast, barren wasteland where I couldn't even find the strength to close my eyes at night. I kept hearing her voice, hearing her laugh in the back of my mind. And I kept seeing her in the places she used to be: her shoes by the door, her favorite coffee mug on the counter, the scent of her perfume still lingering in the air. The days turned into weeks. Friends and family offered support, but there was only so much they could do. Grief, I found, was a lonely companion. It didn't care if you had people around you or not. It didn't care if you had kids depending on you. It didn't care about the future. It only cared about the present, about suffocating you in your own sorrow. My heart was heavy with loss, and my body seemed to follow suit. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. Every waking moment was spent trying to figure out how I was going to keep it together long enough to make sure my kids didn't fall apart too. I became a shell of the man I once was. The confident, happy Jeff gone. In his place was a broken man, just trying to survive the day. But there were little moments that didn't sit right with me. Things Claire had done in the weeks leading up to the accident that I couldn't ignore. The strange withdrawals from our joint account. The late night phone calls, the ones she brushed off as work stuff. The way she seemed distant, like she was somewhere else, even when she was standing right next to me. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was just overthinking things. After all, who would ever suspect their wife of something like this? Claire was the love of my life, the mother of my children. She was the woman I trusted with everything. But those little things, they gnawed at me, and I couldn't shake them. I tried to push it all down, to focus on my kids, on my job, on getting through the next day. But deep down, I couldn't ignore it. Something didn't feel right. And as much as I hated to admit it, the more I thought about it, the more I realized I didn't know everything. Not by a long shot. I had loved Claire, trusted her with every part of me. But now, with her gone, no body, no answers, I was left wondering, what if this wasn't an accident? What if she hadn't just been taken from me, but had chosen to leave? I buried those thoughts. Because who would even entertain them? How could I? It felt insane. I couldn't betray the memory of her like that. And yet, the questions wouldn't stop. They clawed at me. They burned, even though I tried to bury them. And I had no idea just how deep this rabbit hole would go, or how much darker it would get before I found the truth. I had no idea what I was about to uncover. It had been 2 years. 2 long years since the day I stood on that dock, staring out at the still waters of Lake Travis, waiting for Claire to come back. 2 years of hollow days, of pretending that everything was fine, that I was okay, even when I wasn't. And it wasn't like I could go back to the way things were. No. That life was gone. My wife, the love of my life, was dead. At least, that's what I had been told. I had learned to live with the grief, or at least I thought I had. I'd buried my anger, my questions, my doubts deep down, locked them away in some part of me. I didn't want to visit. But every now and then, something would stir them. Something would crack open that cold shell of calm I had built. And I would remember. I would remember that I hadn't gotten closure. It wasn't that I didn't want to move on. Hell, I had tried. I threw myself into work, into being the best father I could for our 2 kids. I even signed them up for more extracurricular activities: soccer, gymnastics, even piano lessons, anything to fill the empty space. But even when I was there, fully present, helping them with homework, taking them to birthday parties, being the dad I thought they needed, I still felt the weight of it. Claire was supposed to be here. She was supposed to be the one taking them to school, packing their lunches, getting them to their doctor's appointments. And now, I was doing it all, alone. I did what I had to do, because I had no choice. But I kept feeling like I was missing something. Or maybe I was just missing her. The thing is, life moves on. People move on. At least, they try. I wasn't sure if I had. I spent a lot of nights lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything. About the last months I spent with Claire before the accident. About the things I never said. About the little signs that I had missed. I should have seen them. I should have known. But you don't want to believe those things. You don't want to believe that the woman you married, the woman you had built your whole life around, could do something like this. But deep down, I knew there were things that didn't add up. I didn't know what to do with those thoughts. They felt like a betrayal. But the more I ignored them, the more they festered. And then, out of nowhere, something happened that made me start questioning everything. It was a Saturday afternoon. The kids were at a friend's house, and I was just running errands, trying to get things done. I had gone to the grocery store to pick up some essentials, and that's when I ran into her. Tessa. Tessa had been a friend of ours, someone I hadn't seen in a while. And to be honest, I didn't really want to run into anyone. But she was there, pushing her cart down the aisle, talking to herself, like she always did. At first, I was happy to see her. She always had this way of making you forget about the stress of the world. But that day was different. She was talking, like usual, But when she mentioned Claire, something in her voice caught my attention. "I thought I saw Claire the other day," she said, like it was no big deal. "I know, it sounds crazy, but it was definitely her. Same hair, same scarf she used to wear. She was with some guy in Charleston." The first didn't say anything at the time, but I knew it was her. My stomach dropped. It felt like someone had shoved the breath out of my lungs. I couldn't process it. I laughed, trying to cover the unease I felt rising in my chest, but deep down, I was numb. "You're sure it was her?" I asked, my voice cracking just a little more than I wanted. Tessa shrugged, acting casual, but I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. "I'm telling you, it was her," she insisted. That was it. That one sentence. That was the moment I started to feel the walls close in on me. My mind went into overdrive, trying to piece together what this could mean. Could Claire really be alive? Could everything I had believed for the past 2 years have been a lie? I didn't know. But that night, when I finally got home, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I kept replaying her words over and over in my mind. Every time I tried to push it out of my head, it came back, stronger than before. I had to know. I had to find out for myself. I didn't tell anyone what I was planning. I didn't even tell my best friend, Mark, who had been there for me through everything. I knew that if I started asking questions, people would think I was crazy, that I was just grasping at straws, holding on to some hope that wasn't there. But deep down, something told me that I wasn't wrong, that something wasn't right, and I had to get to the bottom of it. So, I did what I should have done 2 years ago. I started digging. I went through all the old photos Claire and I had taken over the years, the ones that had been hidden away in a box, gathering dust in the closet. I went through every message I could find, every letter, every text, trying to find a clue, anything that would explain what had happened. But there was nothing. At least, that's what I thought. But then, I found it. A receipt, buried underneath a pile of old paperwork. It was dated just 2 days before the accident. A receipt from a small hotel in Charleston, South Carolina. The name on the reservation? Claire's. And on the same receipt, right beneath her name, was a man's name. I felt the air leave my lungs again. My heart was pounding in my chest, the blood rushing in my ears. This couldn't be real. It couldn't. But it was. I didn't know what to do next. I felt like I was suffocating. The world around me was spinning, and all I could focus on was that damn receipt. Claire had gone to Charleston, and she hadn't gone alone. She had been with someone. Another man. And I had no idea. How had I not seen it? How had I not known? The rage started to build. At first, it was a slow simmer. I couldn't believe it. It felt like the ground was being pulled out from under me, and I was falling into a bottomless pit. But then, something inside me snapped. I had been played. I had been lied to. And Claire wasn't dead. She wasn't gone. She had faked it all. She had faked her death, and I had been the fool. I don't know what hurt more, the fact that she had lied to me, or the fact that I had been so blind, so trusting. It was like every memory I had of her, every moment we shared, had been ripped apart. But there was one thing I knew for sure now. I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I didn't know how yet, but I was going to make her regret what she did. I was going to make sure that she remembered what she had taken from me for the rest of her life. You won't believe what happens next. She fakes her own death, but why? Was it truly her idea, or was there someone else pulling the strings? Trust me, you're going to be shocked by what I uncovered. But here's the thing, how do you think I'll deal with this? Will I get revenge, or will she slip away with everything she wants? Comment below with your guesses. 1. What's her next move? #2. How will I make her pay? I need to know what you think. I couldn't just sit there. I couldn't ignore the evidence anymore. Everything I had been living with for the past 2 years, the grief, the loneliness, the fake closure had just crumbled. Claire's death had never felt real, not deep down. No matter how much I tried to convince myself, there was always a piece of me that knew something didn't add up. And now, here it was, this undeniable proof in my hands, a receipt with her name on it. In Charleston. Just days before the so-called accident. I didn't know what I was supposed to do with this. The only thing I could do was follow the trail, no matter where it led me. So, I booked a flight to Charleston. I told myself it was just for closure, just to understand what really happened. I couldn't keep living with this nagging feeling in my gut. I needed answers, and I needed them now. The kids were with their grandparents, so I had a little time to figure this out. But part of me knew I was treading in dangerous waters. What if I was wrong? What if this was all some huge misunderstanding? But deep down, I knew the answer: this wasn't a coincidence. This was something deliberate. And that thought burned hotter than anything else. As the plane descended into Charleston, my stomach twisted with anxiety. I'd never been there before, never had a reason to visit. But there I was, walking through the airport like some damn detective in a bad movie, searching for clues that I didn't want to find. The moment I stepped outside, I felt the humidity hit me, heavy and thick, but it didn't matter. Nothing mattered except finding the truth. I grabbed a rental car and drove to the address on the receipt. The hotel was tucked away on a quiet street, away from the usual tourist traps. It looked like the kind of place people came to when they wanted to disappear. It was a small, nondescript building, barely more than a couple of stories high, with a sign that looked like it hadn't been updated in years. I parked the car, my hands gripping the steering wheel, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't know what I was expecting, maybe to walk in and find someone who could tell me I was wrong. That it wasn't Claire's name on the reservation. That this was just some bizarre coincidence. But when I walked through those glass doors and into the lobby, everything inside me froze. The receptionist was a young woman, her face bright with that customer service smile. But I wasn't here for small talk. I wasn't here to be polite. I'm looking for some information about a guest who stayed here, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Her name was Claire Matthews. She stayed here around 2 years ago. The receptionist glanced at her screen, typing quickly, her fingers tapping out a rhythm that made my pulse race. She didn't say anything for a long moment, and I started to think maybe I had made a mistake. Maybe I had misunderstood everything. But then, she looked up, her eyes meeting mine. Yes, we have a record of her stay, she said, her voice a little too smooth. She checked in on a Friday and stayed for 2 nights. She was with a man, according to the reservation. That was it. The confirmation I had been dreading. It felt like the ground dropped out from under me. I didn't even know what to say next. Do you remember the man's name? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The receptionist hesitated for a second, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. I'm sorry. I'm not supposed to give out personal information like that. But if you'd like, I can pull the full record for you and give you the contact information for the manager. I was on the edge. Every part of me screamed to demand more, to push her further. But I knew I couldn't. I couldn't risk making a scene. Not here. Not now. So, I nodded, forcing a tight smile, and said, yeah, that's fine. Please, just do that. I watched as she made the call to the manager, and it felt like everything around me slowed down. The ticking of the clock on the wall, the soft hum of the air conditioning, the rustling of papers, everything faded into the background as I tried to steady my breathing. This was it. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, even though I didn't know what the hell I was going to do with the information when I had it. The manager arrived about 10 minutes later. He was an older man, probably in his 50s, with a tired look in his eyes, and a slightly wrinkled shirt that had clearly seen better days. He looked at me, with that same professional detachment you get from people who deal with strangers all day long. He wasn't here to make friends. He was here to do his job. I understand you're looking for information on a guest from a couple of years ago, he said. His voice clipped and formal. I nodded, trying to keep my cool. Yes. Claire Matthews. She stayed here with a man 2 years ago. I need to know who he was. The manager raised an eyebrow but didn't immediately ask why. I'll be honest. We don't usually give out that kind of information without a subpoena. It's company policy, he said, his tone softening just a little. But I can make an exception this once. I'll pull the records, but you'll need to come back tomorrow. I was about to say something when I felt a cold chill run down my spine. The doors to the lobby opened, and I turned my head just in time to see a woman walk through the door. I didn't know who she was, but something about her made my stomach drop. She was tall, dark hair, wearing sunglasses even though it was late afternoon. She was walking fast, like she was trying to blend in, like she didn't want to be seen. And then, as if by some cruel twist of fate, she stopped right in front of me. My blood ran cold. It was Claire, or at least, it looked like her. I couldn't breathe. For a moment, I didn't know what was happening. I froze, not knowing if I should speak, if I should move, or if I was just imagining things. But then she looked up, and she saw me. She froze, too. And for a split second, we just stared at each other, caught in this moment where everything I'd been living for 2 years came crashing down. I stood frozen, the weight of the moment crashing down on me like a wave I couldn't escape. It felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life unfold in front of me. The woman standing before me was unmistakable Claire. But it couldn't be her, could it? The woman I had mourned. The woman I had been told had drowned in a storm 2 years ago. The woman who had left me to raise our kids alone. Yet there she was, right in front of me, looking exactly the same as the day she disappeared. No signs of grief, no hint of remorse. Just that cold, indifferent look in her eyes that made my blood run cold. I must have been standing there for a full minute, just staring at her, too stunned to speak. I was choking on my words, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I wanted to yell, to ask 100 questions, to demand an explanation for everything: the storm, her disappearance, the way she'd left me behind with nothing but an empty house, and 2 kids who would never understand why their mother wasn't coming back. But I couldn't move. My body refused to cooperate. Finally, she spoke, and her voice sliced through the thick silence like a knife. "James, I didn't expect to see you here." Her words hit me like a slap to the face. The audacity. The nerve. I had spent the past 2 years rebuilding my life, trying to make sense of the chaos she had left behind. And now here she was, standing in front of me like nothing had ever happened. Like I hadn't spent every waking hour wondering where she had gone, what she had done, and why she had chosen to leave us without a single explanation. I didn't even know where to begin. "Claire, what the hell are you doing here?" I managed to croak, the anger rising in my chest. "You're supposed to be dead. You were dead. Everyone thought you were dead." Her face didn't change. She didn't flinch, didn't show the slightest bit of guilt. If anything, she looked bored. Like this was some trivial inconvenience for her. Some little problem she could brush off like an old coat. She no longer needed. "I know," she said simply, her tone calm, almost rehearsed. "But I'm not dead, James. I'm alive. And that's all that matters now." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The rage that had been simmering inside me for the past 2 years boiled over. "You think that's all that matters? You think I'm just supposed to accept that you faked your own death and disappeared? You left me. You left our kids. How the hell could you do this to us?" She looked at me then, her eyes cold but strangely calculating. "I didn't want to hurt you, James. But I had no choice. I had to do what I did. And if you're honest with yourself, you know it was the only way." "The only way?" I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "You think this is some kind of excuse? You think you can just walk away from everything we built, from the life we had, and then show up here like nothing happened?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she glanced over her shoulder, as if checking to see if anyone was watching. I followed her gaze instinctively. But there was nothing there, just the empty street. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter, almost apologetic. "I never wanted to leave you. But I was suffocating. I needed to get out, to start over. I didn't know how to tell you that." "Suffocating?" The word sounded foreign coming from her. "You were suffocating, so you just disappear? You fake your own death, and leave me to pick up the pieces of our broken lives? You think I wouldn't have understood if you had just told me the truth?" She took a step closer, her eyes narrowing. "James, you don't get it. You never did. You never understood what it was like for me. I was trapped. I couldn't breathe. I was dying inside, and I couldn't find a way out." The words hit me harder than I expected. For a second, I almost believed her, almost felt sympathy for her. But then I remembered everything, every sleepless night. Every moment spent wondering what had happened. Every moment my children cried. Because they didn't understand why their mother wasn't coming home. "I get it now," I said, my voice rising. "I get it. You're the victim here, right? You had it so bad that you decided to leave your family behind. You didn't care about me. You didn't care about our kids. You cared about yourself." She flinched at my words, but only for a moment. Then, she squared her shoulders, her expression hardening. "I didn't do this to hurt you, James. The first did it because I had to. And now you need to let it go. This isn't your problem anymore. It felt like someone had slapped me across the face. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After everything she had done. After the destruction she left in her wake, she was standing there telling me to let it go? To just accept it? To pretend like none of it mattered? No, I said, my voice shaking with fury. I'm not letting this go. Not until you tell me the truth. Not until you explain why you did this. Her eyes flickered for a second, and I could see something behind them, something dark, something she wasn't willing to admit. You don't want to know the truth, James. Believe me. I didn't care anymore. I had to know. I want to know everything. All of it. Why the hell did you disappear? Why did you leave us? Her silence was deafening. It was as if the weight of my questions had pressed down on her, forcing her to confront the truth she had been running from for so long. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. I wasn't just running from you, James. I was running from everything. I felt a chill run through me. What do you mean by that? She shook her head, as if she couldn't bring herself to say the words. I can't explain it. I had to go. But the truth was already starting to sink in. I didn't need her to say it. I didn't need her to spell it out for me. I had known, deep down, that something had been off from the start. Claire had never been the person I thought she was. And now, standing there in front of me, I realized just how much I had been blind to. This wasn't just a woman who left her family. This was someone who had been living a lie that I had been feeding into for years. And now, I was done. I'm done with you, Claire, I said, my voice breaking with anger and relief all at once. You don't get to do this to me. You don't get to waltz back into my life and expect everything to be fine. She didn't argue. She didn't say a word. And that, more than anything else, told me everything I needed to know. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The nerve of her standing there, acting like everything was just fine, as if the last 2 years of my life hadn't been ripped apart by her betrayal. Claire was alive. The woman I had mourned, the woman I had buried in my heart, was standing right in front of me, looking exactly the same. My mind was spinning, trying to process the sheer audacity of her actions. But beneath that anger, something else was building inside me, something darker. I was beginning to understand that Claire wasn't just someone who had abandoned me and our children. No, she was something more. She was a master manipulator, a woman who could vanish and leave no trace, who could lie so convincingly that even the world would believe her. And now, after all this time, she was back to finish what she had started. Why are you here? I finally managed to croak, my voice barely above a whisper. My mind was scrambling to form a question that even made sense, but I couldn't stop the overwhelming rush of emotions crashing over me. The anger, the confusion, the betrayal, it was all too much. How could she do this? How could she do this to us? Claire's eyes narrowed slightly, and I could see her calculating, like she was trying to decide how much to reveal, how much to hide. I've been keeping an eye on you, James, she said in that calm, almost detached voice that made my skin crawl. I knew you'd be pissed when you found out the truth. But honestly, I didn't expect you to find out like this. It was supposed to be easy. Quiet. No one was supposed to get hurt. I felt a cold chill run through me, a shiver that had nothing to do with the weather and everything to do with the chilling realization that Claire had orchestrated this entire thing, her disappearance, her death, all of it. It wasn't just about escaping. It wasn't about finding herself or whatever bullshit excuse she might give. No, this was about control. She had planned every detail, every step, and now she was playing me like I was some pawn in her twisted game. You think this was easy? I spat, my words coming out harsher than I intended. You think faking your own death and leaving me to pick up the pieces was easy? You think watching our kids grow up without their mother was easy? Watching them cry every night, asking when mommy was coming home, while I had to lie to them, tell them it was an accident? You think that was easy, Claire? She winced at my words, but it was brief, like she was trying to hide the guilt that was threatening to rise to the surface. But I saw it just for a second. It was there, buried beneath that cold exterior. She didn't care about me, not really. She didn't care about our kids either. She cared about herself. I didn't want to hurt you, James, she said, her voice softer now, almost pleading. But you have to understand, I was trapped. I couldn't breathe anymore. I was suffocating in that life. I needed to get out. I needed a fresh start. And you were holding me back. The words hit me like a slap to the face. She had no remorse. She wasn't sorry. She was justifying her actions, trying to make it seem like it was my fault for not being the person she wanted me to be. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to make her understand the pain I had gone through. The sleepless nights, the endless wondering if I'd ever get any answers. But instead, I just stood there, my fists clenched at my sides, struggling to keep my composure. You think I was holding you back? I asked, my voice barely above a growl. You think I was the one who trapped you? You were the one who walked away, Claire. You were the one who chose to leave. Don't put this on me. Her expression darkened for a moment, but then it softened again. She took a step closer to me, and for a brief moment, I thought she might actually reach out. Like she was going to comfort me. But no, this was Claire we were talking about. The same woman who had walked out on our family without a second thought. The same woman who had faked her death to escape the life we built together. She wasn't here to comfort me. She wasn't here to make amends. She was here for something else. I wasn't happy, James, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. I wasn't happy with you. With us. I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't live a lie. Her words stung, but in a way, they also made everything clearer. It wasn't about me. It was never about me. It was about her need for control. Her need for something more than what our life had become. And I had been too blind to see it. I had been too focused on keeping things together for the kids. On making sure I was strong for them. That I hadn't seen the cracks forming in our relationship. I hadn't seen her slipping away, emotionally, mentally, until it was too late. I didn't ask for this, Claire, I said, my voice low but steady. I didn't ask for any of this. I didn't ask to be left behind, to be made a fool. I didn't ask to raise our kids alone, to wonder every single day what happened to you. You made that choice. Not me. Don't you dare try to make me feel sorry for you. She stared at me for a moment, her eyes unwavering, and for a brief second, I wondered if she would finally admit the truth. If she would finally crack and show some sign of remorse. But instead, she just nodded, as if agreeing with something in her own head. I'm not asking you to feel sorry for me, James, she said, her voice now cold and detached again. I'm just asking you to understand. I did what I had to do. And now it's done. There's nothing more to say. I felt a surge of frustration, a rush of blood to my head. You think it's over? You think just showing up here, acting like nothing happened, is going to make it all go away? No, Claire. It's not over. Not by a long shot. You've got a lot to answer for. And I'm not going to let you just walk away from this. Her lips curled into a smirk, and for the first time, I saw something resembling amusement in her eyes. Oh, I don't think you understand. James. You're not the one in control here. I am. I felt the weight of her words settle in my chest like a stone. The reality of what she was saying hit me harder than I expected. She wasn't just back to pick up where she left off. She wasn't just here to explain herself. She had come to finish what she started, and she wasn't going to let me get in her way. The fight for control was just beginning, and I had no idea what she had planned next. But I was certain of one thing. Whatever it wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to end the way she thought. Not if I had anything to say about it. I stood there, my entire world crashing down around me, and for a split second, I thought I might break. The sheer weight of it all, the tangled web of lies Claire had spun, it felt like it was going to crush me. My heart pounded in my chest, my breath coming in short gasps as I tried to hold on to any semblance of control. How had she kept up this charade for so long? 2 years. 2 years of pain, of questions, of silence. And now, standing here in front of me, she was telling me what? That it was all some sort of twisted escape plan? That everything I had known, everything I had loved, had been a lie. You didn't think about me once, did you? I finally managed to force the words out, the bitterness coating them like a poison. You didn't think about how I would have to explain this to our kids, how I would have to face a world where their mother was supposedly dead. You just vanished, and I was left to pick up the pieces. But I guess that was the plan, wasn't it? To leave me here alone with no answers, no closure. Just nothing. Claire's expression didn't change. She didn't flinch, didn't even seem fazed by my anger. She was still the same person, the one who could shut down her emotions and pretend everything was fine, while she destroyed the life we'd built. She'd always been that way, cold, calculating, able to twist reality to fit her narrative. And now she was doing it again, standing there, looking at me like I was the crazy one. I did what I had to do. James, she said again, her voice as calm as it had been when she first walked through that door. I didn't want this to happen, but you don't understand. You never understood me. You never saw how trapped I felt. The life we were living, it wasn't mine anymore. It wasn't who I was. I clenched my fists, struggling to keep my composure. The urge to shake her, to scream at her, to make her feel even a fraction of the pain I'd gone through, was overwhelming. But I held back, forcing myself to stand still, to listen. Because deep down, I knew there was something more to this. She wasn't just here to explain herself. She wasn't just here to make excuses. There was something else. I had to find out what it was. You've been watching me, haven't you? I asked, my voice barely a whisper, but it felt like the words were ripping through me as I said them. All this time, you've been watching me from the shadows, seeing what I've been doing, how I've been surviving without you. I bet you've been getting a sick thrill out of it, haven't you? Her eyes didn't waver. She didn't even blink. I never meant to hurt you, she said, but there was no conviction in her voice. I could hear it now, the hollowness in her words. She was playing me again. She was trying to manipulate me, trying to get me to pity her, to understand her. But I wasn't going to fall for it. Not this time. You never meant to hurt me? I almost laughed, the sound bitter and hollow. You never meant to hurt me? Claire, do you even hear yourself? You faked your death. You left me with nothing but a fake funeral, a fake grave, and 2 kids who would never know their mother. You took everything from me, and you have the nerve to stand there and say you didn't mean to hurt me? I could see her hesitate, just for a second. There was a flicker of something in her eyes, guilt, maybe, or regret, but it was quickly smothered by her cold, controlled mask. She wasn't going to let me see the truth. Not now. Not when she was still trying to play her cards. I did what I had to do, James, she repeated, her voice firmer now, like she was trying to convince herself more than me. You don't understand the position I was in. I didn't have a choice. Choice? The first snapped, taking a step forward, unable to control my anger anymore. You always have a choice, Claire. You could have talked to me. You could have left. You could have done anything but disappear and leave me with nothing. You made this choice. You're the one who chose this life. And now you're standing here acting like you didn't leave me with a shattered heart, a shattered family. You're standing here telling me that you didn't know how much it hurt? She didn't respond at first, and for a moment, I thought she might finally break, might admit the truth of it all. But instead, she just stared at me with that cold, calculating look, the one that always made me question if I really knew her at all. I didn't want to be the villain, James, she said softly, her tone now almost pleading. But I couldn't live the way you wanted me to. I couldn't pretend anymore. I had to find a way out. A way out. I repeated, my voice rising in disbelief. You thought faking your death was the only way out? You thought that was the only option? You thought that leaving everything behind, everything we had, was the answer? Claire didn't flinch. She didn't look away. Instead, she stood there, holding my gaze as if she was daring me to understand her. And maybe, just maybe, for a split second I almost did. But it didn't matter. Not anymore. You think this was your escape, don't you? I asked, taking another step toward her, my fists clenched at my sides. You think you're the one who got away, that you won. But you didn't, Claire. You didn't win. Not by a long shot. You've spent the last 2 years hiding from the truth, hiding from what you did. But you can't run from this forever. You can't escape the consequences of your choices. For the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. It was brief, barely noticeable, but it was there. She wasn't as invincible as she liked to pretend. She had made a mistake, no. She had made a series of mistakes, and now they were coming back to haunt her. You think you've been watching me? I continued, my voice steady, almost mocking. You think you've been pulling the strings from afar? Well, you're wrong. I've been living, Claire. I've been surviving. And I've been raising our kids without you. I've been doing everything you should have been doing. You think you can just walk back into my life, back into their lives, and expect everything to be okay? You can't just erase what you did. You can't just come back and pretend it didn't happen. Her lips trembled slightly, but she didn't say anything. She just stood there, watching me, waiting for me to say something else. But I had nothing left to say. I had laid it all out. She had no excuses, no more lies to hide behind. She had made her choices, and now she had to face the consequences. So, what now? I asked, my voice cold. What do you want from me? What do you want from us? For the first time, she seemed unsure. But instead of answering me directly, she just took a deep breath, her shoulders sagging slightly as if the weight of the situation was finally starting to sink in. I don't know, she admitted, her voice barely audible. I don't know what I want anymore. I could feel my pulse in my temples, the anger coursing through my veins like fire. The weight of the years, the lies, everything that had been done to me, it was all too much. My mind was spinning, but somehow I managed to hold it together. Just long enough to get the words out. There was a moment, just a moment, where everything could have gone differently. If she had just shown some remorse, just some hint of an apology, maybe I could have let it go. But that wasn't what happened. No. Claire didn't apologize. She stood there, cold as ice, eyes full of deflection, playing the same damn game she'd always played. You don't get it, do you? I said, the words leaving my mouth sharper than I intended. You've been running from the consequences of what you did for so long, you can't even see them staring you in the face now. You've convinced yourself that this was all for you, that you needed it. But what about me? What about the people you left behind, huh? She opened her mouth to respond, but I cut her off. I'm done listening to your excuses, Claire. You took everything from me, everything. And for what? So you could be with him? So you could live some fantasy life while I was left to pick up the pieces? You didn't think about what this would do to me, or to the kids. You didn't think about the impact your selfishness would have on them. You didn't think about any of that, did you? She didn't answer. Not right away. She just stared at me, and I could see it, the faintest flicker of something. Regret, maybe? Or was it just fear? I didn't care. I wasn't here for any of her bullshit anymore. I was done with it. And now? Now I was going to get my justice. You don't get to just walk back into my life, Claire, I said, my voice low but seething with rage. You don't get to just play the victim and expect me to feel sorry for you. You've been living a lie for so long, hiding behind this facade, but you're not fooling me anymore. Not now. Not after everything you've done. For a moment, she looked at me as if she didn't understand, as if she truly thought she could somehow talk her way out of this. But I wasn't buying it. No more. Not after what she had done, after what she had taken from me, from us. The years of pain, the sleepless nights, the guilt of wondering if I could have done something, anything, to stop it all. Those days were over. I was taking control of this narrative now. I'm not going to be your punching bag anymore, I said, my voice hardening. You've been playing me, playing us, for far too long. I'm done being your scapegoat. Claire opened her mouth to speak again, but this time I didn't let her. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the phone, and shoved it in her face. I've got everything. All of it. The proof. Claire. The truth is right here. Everything you thought you could hide? I've got it. I've been documenting everything. Every move. Every lie. Every damn thing you've done. She froze. Her face went white. Her lips parted as if she were trying to form words but couldn't. For the first time in this entire sick game, I saw real fear in her eyes. You think you can just come back into my life like nothing happened? I asked again, this time with a grin. I didn't even recognize. I didn't care about her anymore. I didn't care if she cried, or begged for forgiveness, or any of that. I was done. You think you can just throw a couple of half-assed apologies my way and think I'll forgive you? Nah. I'm not that guy anymore. You crossed the line when you faked your death, and left me to bury my wife in the ground. You've lost everything now, Claire, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows it. I could see her trembling, just a little, her hands shaking as she reached for the phone. But I wasn't done. No. I needed her to feel the full weight of the consequences. I needed her to understand just how far I was willing to go to make her pay for what she'd done. You think you're going to get away with this? You think I'm just going to sit here and let you get off scot-free? I said, taking a step closer, my voice growing more intense with every word. No, Claire. Not this time. This time, I'm taking you down. And I'm not stopping until everyone knows the truth. Everyone. The people who trusted you. The people who cared about you. The people who had no idea what you were really doing. You're going to wish you had stayed dead. You're going to wish you had never come back. She backed away, her hands up in defense. James, please, you don't understand. I never wanted this. I never wanted any of this. But I didn't care. I didn't care about her tears or her lies anymore. This was it. The moment of truth. She had destroyed everything, and now it was time for me to destroy her. I pulled up the video on my phone, showing her the evidence screenshots, messages, everything that proved she had been living a double life. The conversations with him, the plans, the lies. I watched as her face went pale, her eyes widening in disbelief as she realized what I had, what I knew. You've been lying to everyone, Claire, I said quietly, almost like a whisper, as the final nail in the coffin. And now, it's time for you to pay the price. She turned away from me, stumbling, but I didn't care. I had already won. This was no longer about me pleading with her, hoping she'd see the error of her ways. This was about taking control. This was about taking back the life she had stolen from me and the kids. It was over. I watched her go. Not with anger anymore, but with something else, something colder. Something final. I didn't need her anymore. I didn't need her lies. And I sure as hell didn't need her fake apologies. All I needed now was to make sure she never hurt anyone again. And I would make sure of it. I turned away, feeling the weight of the years lift off my shoulders. The worst was over. The truth had been exposed. And now, there was nothing left to do but move forward. And I would rebuild, one piece at a time. But this was the end. The end of her, the end of the lies, and the end of the control she thought she still had over me. It was over, once and for all. I could feel the sweat beading on the back of my neck as I sat there, watching Claire squirm. She was trying to put on that same old act. The one where she pretends like everything is fine. Like she hasn't just spent years lying to me, to everyone. But the mask was slipping, and I could see it. The fear in her eyes. The way her hands trembled as she reached for the phone like it was her lifeline. Her escape route. This was it. The moment when everything I had been building up to would finally unfold. The truth. The reckoning. And there was no turning back now. I stood up, pacing in front of her, trying to keep my voice steady. You don't get it, do you? I said, more to myself than to her. I was trying to calm myself, but I could feel the anger. The rage that had been simmering for so long finally boiling over. You've been lying to everyone, lying to me, to our kids, to the people who trusted you. And for what? A life of deceit, a life that wasn't even real. She looked up at me, but her eyes were vacant, like she was trying to shut it all out. But she couldn't, not anymore. The truth was out, and there was no way for her to hide it. I walked over to the table, my fingers brushing over the pile of papers, the phone, the recordings I had collected. This was all her doing, her mess, her destruction. I could have let it go. I could have pretended I didn't know, that I didn't see everything. But I wasn't that guy anymore. I couldn't be, not after everything she had done. Do you know what it feels like? I asked her, keeping my voice low. To find out the woman you loved, the mother of your children, has been living a lie. To have everything you thought was real ripped away from you in an instant. You don't get it. You never did. I watched as she swallowed hard, her lips quivering like she was trying to speak but couldn't. I didn't care. She didn't deserve an explanation. She didn't deserve an apology. Not from me, not from anyone. She had taken everything, and now, it was time for her to feel the weight of what she had done. I pulled out the evidence again, holding the phone in front of her face. I had everything, every conversation, every lie she told, every move she made. And there was no denying it now. She couldn't talk her way out of it. Not this time. Not after everything. You think you can just sweep this under the rug? I said, my voice steady but firm. You think you can just walk away from all of this like it doesn't matter? Like I'm just supposed to forgive you and move on? No. Not anymore. She reached for the phone, her fingers shaking, but I didn't let her take it. This is the real you, Claire, I continued. The one you've been hiding from everyone. The one you've been pretending wasn't there. But it's all out now. Everyone's going to see it. They're going to see what you did, how you deceived everyone. And you're not going to get away with it. I could see the panic in her eyes, but I didn't care. I had waited too long for this moment. I had spent years wondering what went wrong, why things fell apart, and now I knew. I knew everything. And I was going to make sure the world knew too. No more lies. No more pretending. You took everything from me, I said, my voice breaking a little despite myself. You took my trust, my love, my family. And for what? For him? For a few stolen moments of happiness while you ruined everything around you? Do you even hear yourself? Do you even realize what you've done? She opened her mouth to say something, but I wasn't listening anymore. No, don't even try, I snapped. I've heard it all before. The excuses, the lies, the I didn't mean to. Well, guess what? I'm done. I'm done with the excuses, and I'm done with you. I walked over to the window, staring out into the street. My mind was racing. Part of me wanted to scream, to let all of the anger out in one big explosion. But I couldn't. Not yet. I needed to do this the right way. I needed her to understand that she couldn't just walk away from this. That she couldn't just waltz back into my life after all the damage she'd caused. I turned back to her, my heart pounding. You don't get to just disappear, Claire. You don't get to pretend like none of this happened. You don't get to break my heart, and then come back and act like we can just pick up where we left off. No. This is it. This is the end. She seemed to shrink under my gaze, her shoulders slumping as if she were defeated. But I wasn't done. Not yet. Not by a long shot. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what you did. I'm going to make sure everyone sees the real you, the woman who lied, who cheated, who manipulated everyone around her. You don't get to get away with this, Claire. You don't get to just start over while I'm left to pick up the pieces. This is my life now. You lost the right to be a part of it. I could hear my voice shaking, but I didn't care. I was past caring. The weight of everything I had carried for years was finally starting to lift, and I wasn't going to stop until I made sure Claire understood the full extent of what she had done. You ruined everything, I said, quieter now, my voice almost a whisper. And now I'm going to make sure everyone knows the truth. I'm not going to let you get away with this. Not this time. She was silent for a long time, but I could feel the shift in the room. Something had changed. The tension, the dread, the feeling that we were standing on the edge of something too big to comprehend, it was all there. And as I stood there, watching her, I knew I wasn't walking away until I had won. I had been through hell and back. That much was clear. But what they don't tell you when you're in the thick of it, when you're sitting there feeling the weight of betrayal crushing you from all sides, is how much of a fight it is to put yourself back together. It's not like flipping a switch. It's not like one moment you're broken, and the next you're fine. No, it's a process. A long, grueling process. I've spent weeks, months trying to figure out what to do with the wreckage she left behind. With all the damage, the lies, and the years of bullshit that I had ignored, buried deep down because I wanted to believe in something. I wanted to believe that we could get past all the mistakes, that there was still something real between us. But after everything, I knew that was just fantasy. She had shattered it all. And you can't glue together shattered glass, no matter how hard you try. The hardest part wasn't even the discovery. It wasn't when I found out about the affair or when I saw her face fall, the guilt written all over her expression as I confronted her. No. The hardest part was letting go. Actually letting go of the life we had built. Of the family I thought we were. Of the love I thought we shared. You can't just erase it. That's what they don't tell you. You think it's all about revenge. You think once you expose them, once you make them feel the same pain you did, it'll somehow heal you. You'll feel vindicated. You'll feel like you got justice. But it doesn't work like that. No amount of payback can ever fill the hole she left in my chest. Sure, I wanted her to suffer. I wanted her to know exactly what it felt like to be on the other side of betrayal. But the real truth? The real answer? It wasn't about her. It was never about her. It was about me. And how I was going to pick myself up. After I posted everything online, after the calls and the texts, the overwhelming flood of messages from people I hadn't heard from in years, it hit me. I wasn't just punishing her. I was also punishing myself. forcing myself to relive it all, over and over again. In front of everyone. The shame. The ridicule. I thought it would feel like a win. I thought I'd feel better. But I didn't. I felt empty. Like a shell of who I used to be. I had to step away. I couldn't keep doing this. I couldn't keep letting her drag me down with her. Couldn't keep allowing myself to get caught up in the web of her lies. I had to move forward, even if it meant walking away from everything I had known. So, I did. I packed up my things, took a deep breath, and walked out of that house for the last time. The house where we had laughed, where we had fought, where we had loved. The house that held all the memories of a life that was now just a ghost. But I wasn't staying there. I wasn't going to let those walls trap me. I wasn't going to let her poison me anymore. I moved into a small apartment on the other side of town, far away from the life I once knew. It wasn't much, just a one-bedroom with bare walls, and a view of the city skyline. But it was mine. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like I was taking control. Like I was finally doing something for myself. I spent the first few weeks just trying to breathe. Trying to put the pieces back together, one day at a time. I started running again. That was something I used to do with her. Every Saturday morning, we'd go for a jog around the park. But now, it was different. Now, it was my time. I didn't have to talk to anyone. I didn't have to put on that fake smile for her. It was just me, the pavement, and the sound of my feet hitting the ground. It was cathartic. As the days turned into weeks, and then weeks into months, I began to feel that weight start to lift off me. Slowly, but surely. I started to remember who I was before her. The guy who had dreams, who had goals, who didn't let anything or anyone stand in his way. I had lost sight of that person for so long, but he was still there. I began to reconnect with old friends I had neglected for years, while I was wrapped up in that toxic relationship. I spent time with people who made me laugh, who reminded me of who I was, of what mattered. And I started to realize that maybe, just maybe, I was going to be okay. But then, there were the moments. The quiet moments, when I would wake up in the middle of the night, and I'd see her face in my mind. Her smile. Her laugh. Her touch. And for a second, I'd feel that familiar ache in my chest. I'd feel that longing for what was lost. And I'd think, why? Why did it have to end like this? But I wouldn't let myself stay there. I wouldn't let myself wallow in the pain. I had a life to rebuild. A future to create. And that wasn't going to happen if I kept looking back. It wasn't easy. Hell, it was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. But every day, I took another step forward. Sometimes it was small, going out to a bar with a friend, meeting new people, learning to laugh again, but those steps added up. And then came the day when I finally felt ready. Ready to truly move on. Ready to embrace whatever the future held. Because at the end of the day, that's all you really can do. You can't change the past. You can't rewrite your history. You can only control what happens next. I looked at myself in the mirror one last time. Not as the man who had been broken by betrayal, but as the man who had fought through it. The man who had come out the other side stronger, smarter, and with more fire than ever before. I smiled. And for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Real hope. For myself. For my future. For the life I was going to build from the ashes of the life I had once known. And no matter what happened, I knew I was going to be okay. Because I wasn't the man who had been betrayed anymore. I was the man who had survived it. And that was the real victory. After everything's gone down, here's the real question. Was my revenge worth it? Did I get what I deserved? Or was I just a fool in the end? Let me know what you think in the comments. And trust me, this isn't the end. It's only just begun. I learned the hard way that life doesn't always go as planned. Betrayal can break you, but it doesn't define you. What matters is how you rise from it. You can't control what others do, but you can control your response. Don't let someone else's actions steal your peace. Take the time to heal, learn from the pain, and never lose sight of who you are. The future is yours to shape. Don't let the past hold you back. Keep moving forward, because that's the only way to find strength and freedom again.